You thought you were getting Nathan this morning. A few weeks ago, he contacted me and said he was going to be out of town and asked if I'd speak, and sure enough, I'd be happy to do it. But you know, we all what happened to Emily, so they're still in town. This morning, I'd like to take a few minutes to talk about influence and being an influencer. But first of all, when you hear preachers come up here and say, I want to take a few minutes, you know you better buckle up for a good 60-minute ride. But I'm not a preacher, so it could literally be a few minutes, or we could be here till 2 o'clock. So please bear with me. What is an influencer? Are you an influencer? Am I an influencer? Who are influencers? An influencer is somebody that can take control of a situation or a topic. They have the capacity to have the effect of different people or the effect itself and get somebody to think different, to get something to be different than what it may really be or what it really is. Today we look out there and there's influencers. There's politicians are influencers. You've got lobbyists who are influencers. Mostly you're seeing celebrities. You're seeing athletes, movie stars, that they're out there, they're plugging certain products, and because they have a name. But you don't have to be a name, you don't have to be popular, you don't have to know a lot of people to be an influencer. Right now, each and every one of you are an influencer. As you sit, you're an influencer. To people around you, to me, you're an encouragement today because you're here. You're influencing my life today because you're sitting here and you want to learn about God. But let's go back to some of those other influencers to see the type of role they have in our lives, our kids' lives. With social media today, I can only imagine what it's like being a parent with young kids, from whatever age, even up to teens and adulthood, the influence that social media is having on people. I looked it up on the internet on the most popular influencers on Instagram in 2022. I'm sure you've heard of these top 3. Leah Pons, she has over 44 million followers. 44 million people follow this woman. And she is famous for her slapstick sense of humor. People follow her for that. And she has on her sites where you can pay to get into a certain area of her site to get an exclusive scene of her slapstick humor. 44 million people follow this woman because of her humor. The second most popular, and I can't pronounce his name, it's NURS_ET. This gentleman has 35.6 million followers. He, at least, is a Turkish butcher. He is known for preparing fancy meals, the way he cuts meats, and the way he does things in his restaurant. He's really known for where you can go to his restaurant and purchase a 24-karat gold wrapped tomahawk steak for only around $1,100. No problem. So not bad to be an influencer on his part, is it? Then the third one that I have is Dan Bazilian. He's got 32.4 million followers. This guy must be great. He's a high-stakes poker player. He's a thrill seeker. And more important, he's a Hollywood actor. People follow this man because he puts up videos of his poker games and his commentary on it. Because he's a thrill seeker, he'll jump off cliffs, throw open his parachute. Will he make it? Won't he make it? You know he's going to make it because he's got his next video out already. I mean, come on, get real. These people are influenced, and these are only the top ones. These are ones that have some sort of character. Then you've got all the other influencers that have suggestive material, suggestive context on their sites. And this is what people are watching. These are what our kids are watching. These are what are influencing our children. Is it a good influence or a bad influence? Are they taking to heart what these kids are watching from these influencers? I mentioned there's political influencers. We're seeing that today with all the campaigns going on, with all the elections going on. How come they're now just saying how good of a person they are or how bad their opponent is? How come we're not seeing the results of what they're doing while they're currently in office? They're now just trying to get you to sway to keep them into office. There's lobbyists. They're doing it for the sole thing of money or to get what they want. Companies will go to politicians, pay them money, so the politicians will pass laws and bills that will benefit these political lobbyists. I talked about celebrities and athletes who are influencers. The most common ones now you see on TV for food commercials, you're seeing Serena Williams, a tennis star. You're seeing LeBron James, a basketball star. These people are hawking these products because the companies come in and say, people watch you, people like you, people follow you, people will do what you say. Go buy a Subway sandwich, go buy an AT&T phone. People are watching them. There was a basketball star years ago named Charles Barkley. Great athlete. He played basketball from, I believe it was 1984 to 1999. Played for 3 different teams. He was a good person. He was a good athlete. Some of the things he did off the court could be questionable. But he did an interview in 1999, I should say, he did a commercial in 1999 for Nike shoes. Nike come to him and say, we like you. You're going to sell us millions of shoes. We want you to do a commercial for us. So they had their script ready for him. Charles Barkley was getting ready to do a script, and he said, you know, that's really not what I want to do. So he made some few tweaks and changes, and he went back to Nike and said, I'll do your commercial, but I want to say this in it. And here's what Charles Barkley said to Nike when they asked him to do a commercial. In his commercial, Charles Barkley said, I am not a role model. I am not paid to be a role model. I am paid to wreak havoc on the basketball court. Pretty good for a guy that's trying to sell shoes. I'm paid to wreak havoc on the court, and look at my Nikes. But what came into question and what people had discussion about was what Charles said next. Just because I dunk a basketball doesn't mean I should raise your kids. Charles Barkley said that in a commercial. A man who is such a big influence on the court goes on to say, I'm not a role model. I dunk a basketball for a living. Doesn't mean I should be raising your kids. But kids are watching him. They're watching him on the court. They're watching him off the court. He is influencing their lives. In 2002, Charles Barkley went on to say, that's how it came out, that Nike didn't do the role model part. That was me. I think we need to be doing a better job. And in his memoirs, he wrote, I just thought we as a society need to do better in that area of being role models for kids and letting them know that. A basketball star who's making millions of dollars is using his persona, his notoriety, to hawk basketball shoes, but in that same commercial, saying, look, I'm just a basketball player. I'm not here to be a role model for your kids. I'm not the ones they should be looking up to. And later he goes on to say in this same article in 2002, after he retired from basketball, he goes on to say, Charles wanted the parents to know, I can't be a role model for your kid. Your kid doesn't know me. And that's so true. I can be an athletic hero, but a role model should be a mom, a dad, an aunt, an uncle, someone the kid has contact with. And that's so true. As role models, as influencers, we can have more effect on the people that we know and that we're in contact with each and every day. But as an influencer, as a role model like Charles Barkley is, because of his notoriety, millions and millions of people that will never, ever meet him, he's influenced their lives. Just like those folks on Instagram, those 34, 44 million people that they have never met, they're influencing who's following them. Charles Barkley, after he said this, one of his cohorts, another hoopster, Karl Malone, who played for a different team, he wrote in a column to Sports Illustrated, and he kind of chided Charles Barkley. He goes, Charles, I don't think it's your decision to make. We don't choose to be role models. We're chosen, which is true. You can watch any sport you want or any activity you want, and you make the choice to say, boy, I really look up to Charles Barkley, or man, that guy's a thug. I want nothing to do with him. So it's not their choice to be a role model. Charles Barkley chose to play basketball because it's something he loved. He made millions of dollars off it. He didn't go out there and, hey, I'm pretty good at basketball. I think I'll go out there and be a role model. I'm pretty good at basketball. I'm going to go out and make a lot of money. That's what Charles was thinking. But Karl Malone says, Charles, it's not your decision to make. We don't choose to be role models. We're chosen. Our only choice is whether to be a good role model or a bad one. We can be a good influence or a bad influence, Charles, is what Karl Malone was telling him. So what you do on the court, what you do off the court, people are watching. If when a bad play comes up, Charles Barkley, and somebody thumps you on the side, are you going to fight back? Are you going to retaliate? Charles Barkley had done that several times. He has fought back with people that came up to him in the basketball court when he got the elbow or whatever happened to him. Kids saw that. Bad role model. People watched Charles Barkley, how on certain games that he did perform like an athlete, where he did the things that you would want somebody to look up to, and people would follow and mimic what he did. He was a good role model. He was a good influence on people. So Karl Malone was right, not just to Charles Barkley, but to each and every one of us. Are we a good role model? Are we a good influencer? Are we a bad role model? Are we a bad influencer? Parents, you're kind of thrust into the situation of being a role model for your kids. You're around them 24/7. And you know what? You should be a role model for them. The family around you, your parents, your brothers, your sisters, the aunts and uncles, should be role models for your kids. The family here should be role models for your kids who are in this building, when they're around us. We're all role models for each other. We all influence each other by what we say and what we do. When you go to the grocery store and you see people passing, you don't know what type of day they're having. You don't know what type of mood they're in. But how you interact with them, how they see you at a distance, you can be influencing them. Somebody might be having the worst day in the world, and you bump carts with them. And you respond, "Why'd you do that to me?" How would that set their day off? What would they think of you as a person? Or you could say, "Oh, excuse me, I'm sorry, are you okay?" What kind of difference would that make? You may never ever see that person again. Or that very next Sunday, that person might walk through those doors. And how would they remember you with that little interaction that you'd never ever think of would ever come up again? You influence that person. We're bigger influencers than what we think. And some people even think that they aren't even an influencer at all. But we are each and every day, every moment of our lives. Whether it's a big influence or little influence, we influence people. We all have people in our lives that have impacted us in some form. We like to say there's people that we can look up to and say, so-and-so changed my life. I'm a better person because of so-and-so, how they influenced me. There's people in our lives that we can say, I learned what it means to be a Christian from them. We all have those type of people in our lives that are influencers, both for good and bad. It's sad that you can be influenced one way by one person and the complete opposite by another. It's up to us to decide which influence we're going to let apply and live in our lives. And being a good influencer is the type of person that Jesus was. When people met Jesus, as we read in the Bible, they walked away from him transformed. They walked away from him changed. They walked away from him a better person. They walked away from Jesus with a different outlook on life and as what was going on. And the men that Jesus chose, the apostles, we can say that they're the same type of people. They were men of character. And when people met them and had interaction with them, you can tell that they were men of quality and character. They were good leaders. They were good role models. They were good influencers. Paul especially, we can see all the interactions with Paul in the Bible. And there was people that when they had interacted with him, you either loved Paul or you hated Paul. There was no middle ground with Paul because he spoke the truth and you saw it in the life that he lived. But we can all remember back, Paul, what was his life before he was converted? He was a different type of influencer on the world. He was an influence that people feared him because they feared for their lives. But we know as when Paul became converted and followed Jesus, he was a different type of influencer. He was a positive influence in the life of people. As Christians, we're called to impact the world. Jesus said we are to be the salt of the earth and the light of the world. We're told to love as Jesus loved. Jesus is our example. He's the influence of our life. We're to help the hurting. We're to proclaim the gospel to the broken people and a new life to those who are lost. God calls us to change the world that we live in and to change it for the good, not the bad. And we do this by not promoting so many programs or making programs the focus of what's going on in our lives or in the congregation here or through our times of worship here, just by doing these things. The biggest impact we can have by being an influencer comes from Christ living us daily in our daily lives, each and every day. When people see us when we could be at our worst, when they see us when we're by ourselves, they see us when we're out in the world. We can all put on a happy face. We can all put on our Sunday smile, our Sunday best as we come through these doors. But what are we really like when we go out these doors? What type of influence are we having on the world? What type of influence when we leave and go home on Monday morning do we have with each other? If we work with them, if we go to school with them, what type of influence are we? Are we living the type of influence that Christ is shining in our life and people can see him through us? That's a decision we have to make each and every day. And I said we're all influencers. I said you're an influencer. Each and every one of us here is an influencer. You might think, I'm not important enough. I'm not big enough. What can I do to influence people? Quick little story. If you don't think you're an influencer, I want you at some time to go into a sealed room for a night's sleep with a mosquito. And you tell me the next morning how much influence that little teeny tiny mosquito had on your quality of sleep. So if you don't think you're an influencer, you're completely wrong. You're much bigger, much more powerful than a simple little mosquito. The mosquito's just trying to perform a job. As followers of Christ, we're trying to do our duty and promote the gospel, promote salvation to others. And we can be much more powerful, we can be much more annoying, so to speak, than a single little mosquito when you're trying to get some sleep. The main text is out of Matthew this morning, out of chapter 5, verses 13 through 16. You are the salt of the earth, but if the salt becomes tasteless, how will it be made salty again? It is good for nothing anymore, except to be thrown out and trampled underfoot by men. You are the light of the world. A city on a hill cannot be hidden. Nor do men light a lamp and put it under a peck measure, but on the lampstand, and it gives light to all who are in the house. Let your light shine before men in such a way that they may see your good works and glorify your Father who is in heaven. We're told to be the salt of the earth. We're told to have an influence. You know what it's like when you have some food and there's no salt on it? Kind of bland and tasteless. You know what it's like when you have too much salt on it, when salt is overbearing, overpowering. It's even just as bad. We've got the privilege of having electricity in our country. Daily we rely on it. Every morning you flip on that switch, you know that bulb's going to come on. But what's it like when you flip on that switch and that bulb don't come on? You've got a power outage. The light's just not shining. What's it like when a Christian goes out into the world and their light is not shining for Jesus Christ? What kind of influence are they having on the people around them? What if somebody's light in here wasn't shining and we knew it? What would we do about it? What would we do to try to influence them, to let them know that they need to change their ways, to see what Christ has for them and how they should be following him? It's up to us as a family, as Christians and brothers and sisters, to make sure that we stay the salt, that we provide the taste and flavor, that we stay the light and that we keep shining, not just ourselves, but for each other. Like I said before, it doesn't matter how popular you are, how important people think you are. You're important to God. You're important to Jesus. And that's the main thing. And this all happens, our influence to the world and to each other is by Christ living in us daily. By being influencers, we have the duty to guard ourselves so we don't become bad influencers. Like I said, we're influencers. Are you a good one or a bad one? There's no middle ground. You have to be one or the other. And we need to guard ourselves so we don't become a bad influence. And in 1 Corinthians 15:33, do not be deceived. Bad company ruins good morals. We need to pay attention to who we hang around with. In Galatians 5, 7 through 9, you ran well. Who hindered you from obeying the truth? This persuasion does not come from him who calls you. A little leaven leavens the whole lump. Just a little bit of influence, a little bit of leaven in the bread changes the whole thing of it. Are we that good leaven, or are we that bad leaven that's in that bread? We need to be on guard to make sure that we stay positive. We stay the positive influence in the lives of those that are around us. Are we going to be the one responsible for hindering someone from obeying the truth by being a bad influence on them? Are we observing what others say about us when we're around them? Does it make you think when somebody says, you know, that Cliff, he's kind of a shady character. I really wouldn't want to do business with him. You know, Cliff, he's not a bad guy. You can trust what he says. When our company got sold out back in 2009, 2010, whatever it was, the previous owners basically ran the company in the ground. They stiffed a lot of our suppliers on money. I mean, we're not talking hundreds of dollars. We're talking 5-digit, 6-digit, 7-digit numbers that they stiffed our suppliers on. And trying to build it back up, I had the luxury of talking with some of these vendors. And there's one that we stuck for about $50,000. I met with the president of the company. I told him what was going on. He says, that's not us. Dave, that's not us. Not Dave here, but it's Dave Soblowski. Dave, here's the ownership. You know one of the previous owners. The other company's gone. They have nothing to do with this business. Cliff, we've dealt for many years before. I take you at your word. Stuck his hand out and he says, you don't have to be on COD. I trust your words. I had to get an influence on this guy because everything I said to him the 20 years prior to doing business with him was true. I was a positive influence on this man. Business-wise. That's all we did. We only dealt business. I needed a product. He had a product. Our company bought it. We paid the bill. On time each and every time until things went south. And then we started going back under another name with previous owners. He remembered the influence that I was before. I'm not doing this to pat myself on the back. I'm doing this to let you know things you do today will be remembered in the future. Things you did in the past are being remembered today. The good and the bad. I hate to keep saying that, but it's true. People tend to remember the bad so much more than the good. I heard a phrase this past week at work, and I know I'm going to get it wrong. You build trust in teaspoons. You build distrust in gallon buckets. And that's so true. It takes a long time to build trust in people. They can watch you, they can see you, they can see the influence you have, but it takes a long time to build up that trust. But mess up one time, they'll never forget it. And all that trust it took you years and years to build up is gone in a blink of an eye. And to be the best we can, we need to pattern ourselves after the perfect influencer. We know who that is. That's Jesus. Jesus is the perfect example when it comes to influencing people. To make a change in their lives, he influenced ordinary fishermen to follow him and to preach the news. He said, come, follow me. They dropped their nets and they followed him. He influenced Mary Magdalene, a demon-possessed woman. She was so grateful that she became one of his followers and supported him financially as well. Jesus influenced hungry and tired people, and he taught them all day long, as we can see by the feeding of the 5,000 and by the feeding of the 4,000 in Jewish territory and Gentile territories both when he did this. We all know the song about Zacchaeus was a wee little man. Jesus influenced Zacchaeus. He was a tax collector. We know how they felt about tax collector back then. I know how I feel about tax collectors today. I mean, Jesus had an influence on him to make restitution to the people that he cheated out of their money. And we know that Jesus influenced Saul, a devout Jew, to stop persecuting Christians and change his name to begin preaching to them. That had to be a hard role for Paul. People knew who he was. The change of the name doesn't change what he did. Yesterday you're killing people, today you're saving them? Wait a minute, Paul. I'm sorry. Those little teaspoons of trust I had, you just threw that out. You better start all over. What kind of row did Paul have to go through to get people to trust him and listen to him as he's preaching the news of Jesus Christ? But something was different when he became Paul and started preaching Jesus. He had Jesus on his side, and that makes the world a difference. And Jesus' influence didn't stop with the stories and the teachings in the Bible. He's continuing to influence the disciples of Christ today. He's influencing each and every one of us as we read his word, as we study it, and we try to grow closer to him. In my little 3 to 5 minutes, we're pushing a half hour. So I guess I'm becoming a little more like a preacher. Don't worry, Nathan, it's still yours. But Christ is still influencing us today by loving us, forgiving us, and blessing us. I'm going to skip a page for you. We're going to close with a challenge to you. A little bit of homework. Some people don't like challenges. Some people don't like homework. Think of it as a fun task. But first, I want to remind you that God has placed each and every one of us in the center of a circle of influence. You're all in your own center of influence of a group of people. Sometime today or this week, I want you to grab a piece of paper and some type of writing. You don't have to write this down. It's easy to remember. I can remember it, so you can remember it as well. I won't even look at the notes for the first part. Second part, I got to remember. Take a piece of paper, divide it up into 4 equal squares. Doesn't matter what order you put this in. It doesn't matter, where you put it. Start top, right, left. Who cares? But in one of the squares, write the word friends. Another square, write the word family. Another square, write the word work. And another square, write the word church. Then I want you to start thinking about how you're going to fill up those squares. When you get to your friends box, I want you to think of all the friends that you know. Friends. Not people you know, friends. You might have 22 million followers on Instagram. They're not your friends. Write your friends down. And I want your influence will depend on, to those friends, of where you're heading and what pace you're moving at. And I want you to ask yourself, what kind of influence are you going to be to those friends? And remember, God placed you in that center circle of influence to your friends. You've got a special relationship with each and one of those people that's different than anybody else that knows them. In the next square for family, I want you to do the same thing. You'll think about your parents, your grandparents. You'll think about your kids, your nephews, your nieces, your aunts, uncles. Your relationship with your family is different than everybody else's with those same people. Write what type of influence you are to those family members. And remember, God placed you in the center of that circle of influence to all those people. So you got those two done. Now let's go to work. Work can be a little harder. Because there's some people I work with that I just don't want to work with, but you have to. But God has placed us in that center circle of influence with those we work with. Some of you people are in sales. So go through your sales book. How many people do you know in that sales log that you're close to, that you can establish some sort of relationship other than just business and be an influence on them? You know their names. You can get a hold of them. How many customers do you know well? Some of you own your own business and you employ people. Think of those that you're employing. What kind of influence are those? We've got teachers out here. You influence those kids in your classroom each and every day. Not just with the courses that you're teaching them, but with how the kids see you acting and interacting with other students. When somebody misbehaves, they're watching you, seeing how you treat that other child. How are you with the other staff members? Other staff members are watching you. You say you're a Christian, but how do you interact with other people that are Christians and are not? We're being watched as Christians. What kind of influence are you having on these people? And some of these people that you work with, you may be the nearest thing to the light of Jesus that they ever see. You may be the only one that has the courage and be the influence to them about Jesus Christ. Let that sink in. If you've got 20 people in your work list, and out of those 20 people, one of those people, you're the only one that is the light of Jesus to them. You don't know it, but you could be the only light of Jesus to them. Makes you go, wow. I'm sure most have got more than 20 people that are friends, family we work with, but we could be the only source of Jesus that they have. What type of influence are you having on them? Now the tough one, which should really be the easy one. Fill in the box for church. God's joined us all together through the body of Christ. We're all family. What kind of influence are we having on each other? Some of us are here are full of joy. You can always walk around and you can see certain people always smiling. You can't tell that there's anything bothering them. There's other people you can see coming in. You can tell they're distressed every time they come here. Is it just the way they are, or are the struggles really getting to them? What kind of influence are we on those people? Are we showing them the encouragement that we need to be giving them? Or are we just rushing out the door to go home to watch the football game today? Some of us in this room are full of faith. You're an encouragement to all because of the faith that you have, and it just exudes out of you. And there's those here who are full of doubt because they're questioning their faith because of some things that are going on in their life. By being here, you're an influence. Are we a positive influence or a negative influence on these people? What will your influence be to the people on that list that you're making? Your influence matters. I want you to pray for everyone in your circle of friends, your circle of family, at work, in church, that you have in your circle of influence. Remember that little mosquito I talked about? Be that little mosquito. Be that influence on these people that are in your life. You may be the only one that can affect in a positive way that people need to be affected. Said a lot of things this morning to how we should behave and how we affect other people. If you're struggling with things where you need the prayers of the church, you don't know where to turn, we have the opportunity this morning to pray for you. Anytime we're willing to pray for you. And if you come to the conclusion that you want Jesus in your life and you want to serve Him and you want Him to be the positive influence in your life, as we